All right. Well, we are back in the after party. Justin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. It's always fun to get to chat with you guys and hang out for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's kind of talk a little bit about, we had a lot of people on today, had a lot of questions and stuff like that. One of the things that came up from Sean Gregory said, what's the other ways that you know now to market for notes? And I think that direct mail is the typical way that we've been taught, but maybe kind of help dive in a little bit more about what are some ways that you kind of generate lead flow or either for deals or maybe even for investors.
Yeah, that's a great question. And direct mail obviously is one way to do it. The other way to do it is you really need to build relationships with either capital sources, hedge funds, banks, whoever has paper or has funds that goes after paper is another great way to find those sources of loans. And then be the guy in your local market or the gal in your local market that stands up and says, hey, I buy notes. Who has land contracts or note and mortgages that they want to sell? I can buy those from you. And so that's a one way I do it as well as my local RIA club. I'm one of the few people that buys loans. And so I have that opportunity to stand up once a month and talk about that. So those are kind of the quick and easy places. There are exchanges online or different places you can go to buy loans and stuff. And that's another source that we've looked at as well. But there's nothing better than the seller finance loan that you can find from doing direct mail or just from your local area, because those are always the best deals, Brian.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that, Eddie, you're somebody who's been doing this for 40 years. When you started, what were some of the things that helped position you as the subject matter expert on notes in the markets you were doing deals in?
It's funny because Justin, and I'm very familiar with his path. In fact, Justin and I are mutually good friends with a lot of his good clients because they like the fact that he really helps them, the real estate investor, construct good notes so they can get a good price, which is what I really did for home investors back in the 90s, right? And so in the 90s, we were using, I stumbled into figuring out how to do direct mail in 1982, right? So we had tried it a good bit and stuff, but then I really started realizing if I could become, I used to call it, Justin, you remember this? I used to call it being a third base coach.
Yep.
Right. If I could help somebody make a good note, then I became the reliable source naturally to become their exit to go recapitalize, sell the note and start over again. And there's many different ways you could configure that, but really that's the idea. And you do have a sterling reputation in your market with real estate investors that you are the guy. Now, the fear is somebody says, well, I'm not the guy today. I hadn't start. Okay, well, then isn't it true though, Justin, that you really started with more like a direct mail campaign? And as you learn more, then you could start building rapport where you didn't have to drop as much mail to go find business.
Absolutely. I could find the deals through the techniques that I learned, from you guys at NoteSchool. But then it was also working with investors and trying to raise capital and explaining my story and then buying notes for my own self and showing like, this is what I do. Like I buy non-performing and performing loans. And these are the case studies I have. Like I don't have $1 million behind me, but how do I get, to the point to where I can start getting more stuff? And so it's just working with investors. So I'm always raising capital, talking with investors, and I'm always looking for deals because I want to have that deal flow and I want to have that cash flow too coming in. So I can work it both ways.
Sorry, I was going to say, and Justin, one of the other things, so the two things really that people look at when they get into the business is, okay, how do I find inventory? And then the second is building up an investor network, right? And you started a little meetup with just a couple of people. And then, matter of fact, I spoke at your meetup once and in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so you were able to tell us a little bit about that, about how how that worked out.
Well, it's the unknown, right? You don't really know how it's going to work because there's no written manual or step-by-step procedure in front of you that shows you how to do this stuff. It's trial and error, and it's you cannot be afraid to step out and to find out what's going to happen. So I started a meetup with no money involved, right? Just going on to different websites and saying, hey, we're getting together, talking about notes. And, 2 or 3 people showed up for the very first meeting. So it's kind of discouraging at first, but then you just have to understand you got to stay the course. It's like if you have a business and you use social media, you can't just have 1 or 2 social media posts and expect to get a following. You have to have a consistency and a trail of social media posts on and on and on and on for several months or even a year before you finally get a following. So it's the same thing with your meetup and anything else you do as an entrepreneur. You have to stay the course and be disciplined. And slowly it's a snowball, it just builds and builds and builds and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And because there's not a lot of people doing this in the note space, especially, it's easy for me to brand myself as the note guy. So I've been very fortunate that there's not a lot of, it's not crowded in this space right now. So it's been easier for me to develop a following. And I think we have over 1,000 followers for our meetup now.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And especially in times like this, we've said several times on the show that a lot of investors, especially a lot of landlords in the last 12 months or so, are looking for ways to get similar returns or maybe even keep their return on investment. But how do we take a lot of risk off of the table, right? And simply by presenting the solution of, hey, I can show you how to be the bank and own a note. You don't have tenants or toilets. The messaging is working really well right now. And so it's just kind of a very primed market to start the conversation, if that's for those of you who are on the show right now, trying to figure out if this is for you or not. If you're somebody who's wanting to dive in and you're tired of competing with the HDTV, environment, it sometimes can be a great fit. There's not going to be an HGTV show on note flipping, I don't think.
It could be.
There could be. It's just not as sexy as knocking down walls.
Justin will do that, Brian.
There you go.
My resume, my video resume, and everything.
Yeah. I love it.
You know what? It's a quiet giant. Is how I see it.
Yeah, exactly. And in the meantime, before everybody else in the world finds out of it because of an HGTV show that comes up, you might as well just keep going, Justin, and making as much as you can while it's still a quiet giant. So. A couple other things that people saying, obviously lots of people, William says, congrats. Micah, I know, pointed out that he wished he would have learned this 10 years ago. Obviously, once you learn it, it is quite interesting to see how it can start to replace a lot of the traditional real estate strategies and still not have to give up anything. And so, yeah, it's a pretty big deal. And then obviously we've got a super job here and more appreciation for being on the show for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'd say go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, let me throw one more aspect into this. And so, guys, here's the thing. Justin, you were doing a lot of, flipping, right? Making one-time money. And now what you're doing is you may flip 4 and keep 1 to build long-term wealth, right?
Absolutely.
Or 2, right? Eddie, you can talk about that, man.
Well, when Justin started with us, I gave him anybody that comes through the system, I gave him a very clear path to say, look, I don't want you just to make transactional income. I'm not the giant fan of somebody just flipping houses because there's no wealth in it. Right. The way that you build wealth is you have an asset that pays you a long time in the future that you don't have to go do anything for. That's wealth. And so Justin makes his eating money on flipping notes, and then he still has enough deal flow that he can then grow wealth with it and earn payments long time in the future, be in the bank, and not having to go get up and find another deal just to go to the mailbox and get the check he's already entitled to. And that's just smart application right there. He just did a great job of applying. I mean, look, I've tried it all, right? I mean, I've been doing it 40 years. I've tried about everything, Joe too. And the truth of the matter is just does your heart good to see some guy that now has a family situation that's awesome because he's built a business that fits his family.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is so great. Well, we're going to kind of wrap up NoteSchool TV for this week. I did see Samed said, how did you learn what you know? Did you take the NoteSchool classes? I know you had mentioned a couple of times that you did, and I was just going to simply state that probably if you're trying to figure out maybe the next step for you, how to get involved with some of the classes that we teach, just simply go to noteschool.com/TV, and that's a great place to get plugged in and learn a little bit more about the classes that we teach. But Justin, if you wanted to say anything, feel free, but that's, kind of what he had mentioned.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did get my training from NoteSchool, from Eddie and Joe and the other educators in your on your team, and the concepts that they teach are what I put in real life applications. So you talk about partials, you talk about arbitrage, you talk about raising private money. There's so many things you can do in the note business. It's not just about flipping. It's just what I chose to start off with to build a business out of it. Like Eddie said, I have to eat, right? I got to make a little bit of money. So I have to have transactional money. And then I want retirement money. So I have to grow my wealth. So that's what I do. I learn other techniques to build my wealth long term. So I don't have to rely on transactional money every single month.
That's it. That's it. Well, thank you so much once again, Justin. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Eddie. We'll plan on seeing you two next week on NoteSchool TV on Wednesday. And Justin, we'll catch you at an event here soon. Well, thanks everybody for jumping on. Stick around for the after party. We'll see you on the other side.